Alrighty, guys, I'm gonna get things going here in just a hot second. I'm still setting this up. I had to move things over here to YouTube and kind of shuffle a couple of background things. Not that you guys care, but I had to shuffle a couple of background things. But we'll get going here in just a hot second. This is a good microphone test, though, for everyone, just to make sure that I'm not blowing your eardrums out when I jump on here in a couple of seconds. Alrighty, guys. Hope everyone is having a good morning thus far. You may be thinking to yourself, man, Nick, that looks like the same shirt that you were wearing last night. And let me tell you, the best part about working from home is yes, this is the same exact shirt that I was wearing last night. So here's Ida. It's still floating around, unfortunately, in the Gulf of Mexico. A Category 4 storm. Looks like it's about to make landfall across southeastern Louisiana. Still waiting to see what the National Hurricane Center has to say in terms of the overall intensity. I know the hurricane hunters just went out there to kind of grab the last-ditch stats before this thing runs ashore. Currently a Category 4, but right on the cusp of being a Category 5 storm. Going through eye-wall replacement, in fact, before landfall, which is both good and bad. The good news is with that the intensity of that inner core may not be quite as intense, although it depends on where it is in the cycle as it makes landfall. The bad news is that the intensity of the wind around that, so it widens the overall kind of the overall wind field. And so those that were on the fringe of, kind of hurricane to tropical storm force wind or impacts are now, with it going through this cycle, more likely to see hurricane force impacts rather than tropical storm force. Now, if you were on the fringe, let's say in Clark County, Mississippi, and you're only looking at wind at 30 to 35 miles an hour anyway, that may be at 40 now, or 45 at its worst. So, not all terrible news, unless, of course, you're living across parts of Alabama. Well, did I lose my... See, this is what happens when... let's see. You guys are going to lose the picture here for a hot second, but I'll bring you guys back. Give me just a hot shake here. Not quite sure why that went away. Yeah, that should be... How about that one? There we go. Sure, there we go. Now we got Ida back. There we go. So I'll run you guys through a couple of different things here. You can kind of see Ida, again, real close to making landfall right now. We can zoom in a little bit tighter. We can get in on the floater. And I'm going to run this back, and this is the 1 minute satellite imagery. So this is a real good look at what things look like right now. And for folks in southeast Louisiana, I know Grand Isle folks didn't evacuate from Grand Isle. That's really sad for those folks, because they're just getting hammered right now. So if we zoom on over to, somebody mentioned the radar. Let's pull up EDD here, and we'll turn on some of the warnings and get an idea. Come on, clear out of there. Clear out of there. I'll get in here a little bit tighter. Looks like it's not going to let me. Come on. So all these warnings out. There's nowhere for me to grab a hold of the map and zoom around. You can see all the tropical storm and hurricane warnings that are in effect. Hurricane warning to the south, tropical storm warning here. Tornado watch is actually in effect for much of South Mississippi and some of the parishes of Louisiana, as well as parts of Alabama, I believe. So with all the rain bands moving through, you're going to see some very heavy rain and some very gusty wind at times. So far, there are no warnings in effect, but there are a fair amount of rain bands that are starting to push through the area. Your IDA checklist, very heavy rainfall, wind gusts up to 140 miles an hour. That's right along the coast with this thing. Tropical tornadoes, and somebody was asking what's the difference between a tropical tornado and a regular tornado. The tropical tornadoes are usually pretty short-lived. They're a lot weaker, EF0, EF1. They're moving a lot faster, usually going between 50 and 70 miles an hour. And, wind speeds in these are, again, EF0, EF1. So you're talking about less than 100 miles an hour for the most part. And usually they're doing a lot of tree damage and power line damage, fence damage, anything that's kind of exposed to the elements that isn't, hammered, screwed, or connected one way or another to something else, usually have the biggest problems. So, your roof isn't going to blow off on an EF0, but your shingles may. The tree that falls may fall through your home, and that may cause the damage, but the tornado isn't going to suck people out of homes. I know that's the number one fear that a lot of people have with tornadoes, is they're afraid of a window breaking and then they get pulled down. That's unlikely in a vast majority of tornadoes, but particularly unlikely in the EF0s and EF1s. So prepare for power outages of at least a couple of hours. And I got a question a little bit earlier asking about what are the lengths of the power outages for different places across South Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama. I would plan to be without power for at least 4 to 6 hours across most of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, at the very least. The farther off to the south and southwest you go, that number climbs. So, if you're living in Bay Springs, maybe 4 to 6 hours. If you're living in Laurel, maybe plan on 5 to 8. Hattiesburg, plan on 6 to 10. Columbia, plan on 12 to maybe 15. And if you're in the parishes of Louisiana, I would plan on being without power for 12 to 24 hours at the very least, perhaps even longer. There was a tornado warning out toward Mobile. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that in the chat. It was a little bit earlier. They had one come ashore. I think Dauphin Island was included in that, part of Mobile County. In fact, even I think Jackson County in Mississippi was a part of that as well. And so trees getting blown over and branches are going to fall out of trees. So if you didn't take the time over the last couple of days to kind of take a peek at some of the trees around your house and clear out some of the dead or dying branches, Mother Nature will do it for you. The unfortunate thing is most likely those will just become projectiles for possible damage either to your home or a home down the street or a car. Hopefully the tree is far enough away from things when the branches fall out, or if a tree gets blown over, it doesn't do any damage at all. Localized flooding is going to be a concern with rainfall rates up to 2 to 3 inches an hour in some of these rain bands, particularly across the parishes of Louisiana. And, of course, possible tornado warnings. We've already seen a couple of those this morning. the water to last a couple of days, food to last for a couple of days. Make sure your cell phones are charged. I mentioned this on Facebook the other day. I just plug in the phones and just leave them there. I just leave them plugged in until you run out of power, and then you're at 100% no matter what. And that'll hopefully get you through. And make sure you've got a way to receive warnings from the National Weather Service. I had my little Noaa weather radio. I had my little spin-up guy in here, but the little red ones you can kind of spin to charge. Those are great. Mine's got a little solar power thing on the roof and a USB connector, so you can charge cell phones and other things out of that too. Here's the latest cone. Let me refresh and make sure. There we go. The 10 a.m. advisory wind at 150 miles an hour, moving to the northwest to 13 miles an hour, so it is slowing down. Although still moving a little bit faster than anticipated. I believe they had the forward momentum at this point around 11 miles an hour 24 hours ago, so it is still moving a little bit quicker. But you can see that the cone here does take it into southeastern Louisiana and then into western and southwestern Mississippi before it curls and goes all the way up and then back out to sea along the northeast coast. Yesterday, I had drawn this, and this ended up being pretty good. It looks like we're going to have landfall kind of right in this point. So, that 12 to 18 hour forecast panned out pretty good. By 8 a.m., this is where all the tropical storm force wind is. As we approach 2 o'clock, I think some folks are probably already getting tropical storm force wind gusts in these areas. And then by 8 o'clock tonight, a little bit farther off to the north. Again, I'll refresh this and make sure we've got the absolute latest. Yeah, by 2 o'clock, you can see the National Hurricane Center kind of agrees. It says by 8 p.m., a little bit farther off to the south. So it's suggesting that this is going to slow down even more and allow even longer time for the poor folks in southeast Louisiana just getting hammered by this thing. And then the hurricane force wind, again, I'll refresh this to make sure it's the latest data. You can see the hurricane force wind getting all the way up to extreme southwestern Mississippi at this point now. Given how slow this is going to go, of course, this point here, it's already up here. So, this is from the 7 a.m. advisory. I would guess that there's going to be a new update coming out at 1 with some better, more accurate detail there. You can see the tornado threat is mainly across extreme eastern Louisiana, southeastern Mississippi, and southern Alabama. For your tropical tornado threat. The wind threat, of course, is everywhere. No hail. You don't usually get hail in tropical systems, though if you do get hail, let me know. That would be quite the story to tell. And, of course, a marginal a slight risk from the SPC today down along the coast. We'll refresh this again, see if... I'm pretty sure this is the latest data, yeah. Now, most of the heaviest rain is going to be in southeastern Louisiana with 10 to up to 20 inches of rain. Especially as you get closer to the mouth of the Mississippi and into parts of New Orleans. That kind of 6 to 10 range is taken over most of southern and southwestern and southeastern Mississippi for folks. And this is kind of flip-flop back and forth over the last couple of days. But it looks like now, given the speed, the forward momentum that this is going to have, you're going to have a lot of rain across South Mississippi. And that is going to lead to a fair amount of flooding. You can see some of these river gauges showing moderate to major flood stage in some places. We can actually click on these and you get kind of a model idea about when that peak is going to be. Around September 1st is when the peak is going to be for flooding in Laurel along the Tallahassee. So this isn't going to come up right away. You can see how we kind of move forward in time. It's going to take a while for all this rain to make it to the rivers, but once it does, you can see that it may take a while for it to peak. We've got the peak here coming perhaps a little bit later, a little bit closer to the 4th or 5th of September as you make your way up the Chickasahee, as you make your way down toward, let's say, the Leaf River in McLean. You can see that one comes up pretty quick and just kind of holds as we head through the next couple of days, given all the rainfall. Of course, everyone knows if you live along the Leaf moving through parts of Perry and Greene County, once that thing comes up, it takes a long time for that thing to recede. So let's see here. If everything is out of focus, by the way, I saw a question in the comments here. If everything's out of focus, that may be the bandwidth getting to you. let's update this. 12 to 16 feet of surge. If you were watching my video last night over on Facebook, I mentioned that prepare for 1 to 2 feet higher than what the NHC was showing last night, and here we are. 12 to 16, then 8 to 12 across the east coast of Louisiana, north of the mouth of the Mississippi River, and then kind of 6 to 9, and eventually 4 to 7 along the Mississippi coast, 3 to 5 into Mobile Bay. And then 1 to 3 as you make your way out toward Pensacola. Things drop off pretty quickly as you go across the Louisiana coast. By the time you get to Vermilion Bay, you're only talking about 1 to 3 feet of surge. Of course, it passed over all of the very warm water in the Gulf of Mexico, and now it's back over some slightly cooler water. It's still pretty warm, but it's not quite as robustly warm as back off to the kind of west or east and southeast, and that's why we kind of saw things erupt. I wanted to pull up real quick just kind of the wide view real fast and just kind of highlight the fact that yes, there is another one out here with an 80% chance of development over the next 5 days. This is the next one we're going to have to watch. So yes, I know, one hurdle at a time, Nick, but as we get through one, I know folks are going to be without power for a couple of days. This thing is still 2 weeks away. At the earliest. But if you're going to be without power for a day or 2 or 3, or for folks in Louisiana, maybe a week or 2 or 3, it may be tough to get information about this. So I just want to let people know right now that yes, you may be dealing with this right now, but in a week or 2, we're going to have to deal with perhaps another one getting toward the Gulf of Mexico. That doesn't mean that it's definitely coming to Louisiana, but it is something to keep kind of on your personal radar. Getting over to some of the model guidance, let me refresh this page and see if the 12Z should be in by now, I would think. No, it's not in yet. Well, we do have intensity and track guidance from 12Z, and you can see that's pretty clued in that we're already starting to make a northwesterly to kind of more northerly turn. This is going to pull up and then go out to sea. The H-Wharf is still pretty set on this thing kind of curlicuing back around and trying to make another run toward the Gulf of Mexico again. How about no, Scott? Let's not do that. Model guidance showing a Cat 4. And again, a lot of these guys up here, we don't really need to pay attention to. They are not designed for a landfalling tropical system. So as this makes landfall, yeah, it's going to kind of fall down. Even the H-Wharf keeps this thing low, even though it wants to make another run at the Gulf of Mexico. Real quick, let's run over to the 12Z, and we'll take the HER model forward with potential wind gusts here. And the HER is already wrong, which is a little disappointing. Let's see. Let's run this thing to the 15Z. That's a little better, though. I think it's still just barely off to the west. But nevertheless, you kind of get the idea. As this moves ashore, you can see some of the strongest wind by the time we get toward 7 o'clock tonight is just starting to make it into some of the parishes of Louisiana. So the roughest of the weather, originally we were thinking would begin, kind of peak intensity would start at maybe 4. We may have to push that back to maybe 7 o'clock for you folks in Louisiana. And then as we head through the overnight hours, here we are just shy of midnight is when some of the strongest wind starts to sneak into parts of Mississippi with wind gusts at 50 and perhaps even approaching 60 or 70 miles an hour. Starting to get into parts of Pike, Walthall, Marion, and Pearl River counties. And then, this is as far out as this one goes. I'll have to go back to 12Z. This won't be quite as accurate or precise, but it will give you a good ballpark estimation for things as we head through. Here we are at midnight again as we head through about 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. Watch the wind field just expand with this thing too. Pretty tight and concentric, and then we kind of stretch everything out, and that wind field gets much larger and kind of encompasses most of Louisiana, most of Mississippi, and parts of western, Alabama, and a slice of the Florida Panhandle. And then as it exits stage north, by the time we get toward Monday night, you're still talking about wind gusts across a much larger area, between 20 and 40 miles an hour. And then it kind of kicks on out of here by the time you wake up on a Tuesday morning. Folks in Louisiana calming things down, South Mississippi calming things down, and South Alabama also starting to calm things down. Getting back over to the EDD, I'm going to turn off all the hazards on here and give you guys kind of an idea about where this is relative to everything else. And you've got rain bands moving through parts of South Mississippi and Alabama right now. The heaviest of the rain and the strongest of the wind is now moving just onshore across parts of southern Louisiana. So I know there are plenty of questions over here on the channel, although not as many as I tend to get on Facebook, which is both, I suppose, good and bad. But I do want to leave you guys. I'm going to pop this back over to that one. Oh, no, this one. There we go. And leave you guys with the radar as well as the satellite shot here. No one needs to look at my face while I answer some of these questions. More folks asking about stuff being out of focus. Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. You know, the nice thing about YouTube is it doesn't tend to use as much battery power, and it doesn't use as much bandwidth as Facebook does. I do a lot of these on Facebook for those that are watching me on YouTube for the first time. You can find me, Nick Lilliga, WDIM. I don't work at WDIM. Meteorologist Nick Lilliga. How about that for a flub? Can you tell I'm tired, folks? So the good news is it doesn't use as much battery and bandwidth. The bad news is sometimes stuff gets out of focus a little bit quicker. What does it look like for Lauderdale County? Yeah, if you're living that far north, you're talking about sustained wind about 30, gusting to 45. The peak intensity for you folks up in Lauderdale will likely be sometime after midnight tonight, and then through the day tomorrow, with rain bands and heavy rain and the possibility of some tropical tornadoes for you folks as well. The models seem to have done a really good job with the overall forecast of this storm. Yeah, it certainly looks like they got the track down pretty good. You know, 2-3 days ago, you know, looking at everything, I said Morgan City, and that was based off all the data. And I gotta say, you know, being within, you know, heck, even 50 to 100 miles, you got to feel pretty good about model guidance with that. We were calling for, you know, a 3 or a 4, and that's what we ended up getting. The models didn't pick up on that, but the humans are starting to get better, perhaps, at forecasting these things, given what the models say. And so, yeah, you know, forecast, it was hopefully pretty accurate for folks with respect to this one. Midnight for Marion County, yeah. Yeah, Tiffany, this is going to be kind of an overnight event for a lot of folks in South Mississippi, unfortunately. And so your peak timeline is probably going to be from about 10 o'clock tonight all the way through about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, perhaps even leaking into about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The county-by-county breakdown that I put up on the blog a little bit earlier today probably still holds, though I may need to make some minor slight adjustments to it, given how this thing is trying to slow down a little bit. Once we get that final data from the hurricane hunters as this makes landfall, which should be coming back over the next, you know, hour to 2 hours, I think that is going to really help us out, because they can't fly, hurricane hunters can't fly through the hurricane when it's over land, right? It's not safe, so they don't do it. Plus, then we've got, you know, land observations that we can make, but I'm hoping to get one more of those out to help everyone out just one last time, kind of deal with this going forward. Yeah, Jeff Davis County, kind of the same way. You're looking at, you know, the peak intensity of stuff probably overnight. Folks dealing with probably, you know, somewhere between 5 to 8 inches of rain, maybe even more, depending on how these rain bands set up. The possibility for some tropical tornadoes. In Mize, you're already without power. My goodness. Yeah, so, yeah. If you lose, so I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna back up a second. Hold on. So if you lose power, let's go back here. If you lose power, I would expect when you lose power, whenever that is, expect to be without power for basically the remainder of this thing. Because, you know, power crews can't really go out when wind is blowing at 20 to 50 miles an hour to repair it. I did not anticipate people in South Mississippi to start running into the I'm without power until later tonight. I mean, like 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock tonight. And then the anticipation was, okay, if you lose power at, let's say, midnight, this thing should be able far enough out of here by Monday afternoon. The power crews, you might not be able to get bucket trucks up because I think it'll still be too windy for that. But if it's not a power line down problem, if it's just a transformer problem or something, they may be able to go out and fix that. But if you're already without power, I would anticipate and expect to be without power for a long time now. And I may have to kind of reanalyze what I was thinking. And originally I was going to throw out another post, and I still plan on doing this here in the next little bit, where, how long will we be without power, kind of a post for kind of a bunch of the counties across the area. But given that some people are already in situations where they're getting clipped with power outages, it's going to be a long haul with no power. Because this storm and the wind field with this is pretty large, and guys, the linemen can't get out there if it's windy. So I'll try and get that post out here in a little bit for everyone. Let's see here. Any other questions? No, I'll be here, and I'll probably be flipping back and forth between here on YouTube and Facebook for everybody. I wanted to do this just so folks have something. If you lose power, you don't have good cell phone data, for folks just to have something. Because I know Facebook can be kind of a data hog and a battery hog on your phone. But what I'll try and do is I'll try and bounce back and forth. Do some on Facebook, do some here on YouTube. Throughout the day today, as well as posts over on the blog, nickelblock.com. Again, just in case you're new, you don't know who I am. I'm just a guy. I'm just doing the weather. But if you want to jump over on the blog and kind of get an idea about what to expect, hopefully that'll be helpful. I-20 between Meridian and Jackson for peak timeline. That's going to be probably late tonight and into the overnight hours and into tomorrow morning for you folks. In fact, it may be until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning before kind of your peak wind starts showing up, and that may last until Monday afternoon for folks. The farther north you go. And that's very kind of you guys to say that you miss seeing me on WDAM down there in South Mississippi. I miss all you guys too, but I found, I think, a more efficient way of perhaps reaching a lot of you guys with some solid information. There aren't as many hurdles in the way of getting direct, regular info, just that useful information to you guys. So anyway, I'm gonna bail from this one for now. I'm gonna write you guys up a new post for some power outage stuff. I'm gonna look over some things, and hopefully I'll be back a little bit later this afternoon or evening. For those that are, thank you, Jalen. I appreciate that. Rainfall still going to be about the same, Tiffany asked, give or take. I tend to think this eyewall replacement cycle that it's going through is going to expand the wind field, but the rainfall will likely be just about the same. Though we are starting to get to the point where we can see trends for rain bands and everything. And so over the next, again, hour or 2 or 3, we will get a much better sense about what to anticipate by the time this is all said and done. This is why it is so important. It's so important to prepare early. Prepare for one category higher than the forecast, because then when situations like this happen where it's running ashore, let's say, for example, I have to say, actually expect winds. I had to do this morning. I had to bump the wind back up 5 miles an hour with the gusts. We'd been stair-stepping down over the last 24 hours, a 5 mile an hour here, a 5 mile an hour there. Last night I had to bump it up 5 miles an hour for some folks, and then this morning I had to bring the gusts up 5 miles an hour for pretty much everybody, given what we were seeing with the kind of eyewall replacement cycle and everything else. So it's minor stuff, sure. It's only 5 miles an hour, you think, but that's important. And that's why it's important to prepare for one category higher. Then you're covered. And then you don't have to worry about stuff like that. So, but again, I'll go through everything, and I'll try and get you guys some good info coming up a little bit later, early this afternoon. and I'll probably jump on and get you guys another video coming up a little bit later today. But for now, everyone, stay safe, stay dry, and hang in there. We'll all get through this together.